Welcome to our channel. Today, we bring you news that weighs heavy on the heart. Some truly remarkable people have recently left this world. In this video, we will share their stories, their legacy, their final chapters. As a sign of remembrance and in support of their memory, please subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your simple action can help others hear their stories and keep their memory alive. We won't delay any longer. Let's begin this tribute to those we've lost. On April 23, 2025, in Detroit, Michigan, the curtains closed on the life of Raymond Lee Whittaker, a celebrated American jazz musician, composer, and teacher whose soulful sound and fierce devotion to musical education reshaped the language of American improvisation. He died in the very neighborhood where, as a boy, he first tapped out rhythms on his grandmother's kitchen pots, returning in the final chapter of his life to the community that first heard his music. Raymond was born on August 28, 1946, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, during an era of racial segregation and economic hardship. Raised by his grandmother, a gospel singer, and his uncle, a part-time trumpet player and postal worker, Raymond's early life was marked by the sweltering summers of the South, church choirs, and poverty that forced resilience into the bones. His father left when Raymond was 5, and his mother died of tuberculosis when he was 10, losses that gave his playing an aching tenderness even as a teenager. By the age of 15, Raymond had built his own trumpet from discarded parts and was sneaking into jazz clubs along the Mississippi. A local bandleader, Curtis Freeman, took notice of the lanky kid with an ear for harmony and became his first mentor. Through Curtis, Raymond learned the value of discipline. "If you don't bleed on the valves, you're not playing," he would later tell his students. In 1965, Whittaker was accepted into the New England Conservatory of Music, one of the first black students to enroll in its jazz program. There, he studied under jazz innovator Gunther Schuller and helped pioneer the third stream movement, the fusion of classical and jazz traditions. His thesis, Sound Without Borders, would later be considered foundational reading for genre-blending composers. Raymond's breakout came in 1972, when he released Midnight Geometry, an album that seamlessly combined bebop, modal jazz, and Afro-Cuban percussion. The record won the Downbeat Critics Poll for Best New Jazz Artist and established Whittaker as a fearless cerebral force in the music world. The New York Times called his work a meditation in motion, both heartbreak and calculus. Over the next 3 decades, Whittaker toured the world, playing alongside legends like Herbie Hancock, Max Roach, and Nina Simone. Yet, even at the height of fame, he remained committed to education. In 1987, he founded the Detroit Institute for Jazz Ethics, a nonprofit music school that offered full scholarships to underserved youth. By 2000, his alumni included Grammy-winning musicians and renowned ethnomusicologists. In 2010, the National Endowment for the Arts honored Raymond with the Jazz Masters Fellowship, the highest honor in American jazz, citing his unrelenting pursuit of musical truth and his mentorship of a generation seeking harmony, both musical and societal. He was also awarded the Presidential Medal of Arts in 2014 for his decades of cultural contribution and community work. Raymond faced personal struggles. A perfectionist, he often clashed with record executives and was known for walking out of sessions where he felt artistic compromise loomed. He suffered from depression in the late 80s, following the stillbirth of his only child with his wife, Celeste, a painter and civil rights organizer. The tragedy marked him deeply, and while their marriage endured, it was often described as 2 storms in silent orbit. In private, Raymond was soft-spoken, meditative, often lost in vinyl records or the poetry of Gwendolyn Brooks. He cooked elaborate Cajun meals and practiced yoga every morning. He kept a journal in which he wrote, "Sound is the only prayer I know." Students revered him, describing him as equal parts monk and fire. He pushed them to listen harder than you blow, and reminded them, technique is just your voice learning to walk upright. In his final years, Whitaker was diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, a rare neurodegenerative disease that slowly robbed him of motor control. Despite this, he continued to teach, using a stylus and screen reader to critique student compositions. His last public appearance was at a youth jazz festival in March 2025, where he nodded from the audience as a young quartet played his piece Blue is a Circle. His final words, spoken to a former student 2 days before his passing, were simple: "Let them hear you breathe between the notes." Raymond Lee Whitaker left behind not just memories, but an entire era embodied in his writings, ideas, and students. On April 20, 2025, in San Francisco, California, the world bid farewell to Eleanor Grace Whitman, a towering figure in American literature, professor of creative writing, and a staunch defender of the written word as a tool for justice. She passed away in her modest Pacific Heights apartment, where she had composed her first award-winning short story nearly 50 years prior. The room flooded with morning light, her final breath quiet as the turning of a page. Eleanor was born on May 4, 1947, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, into a family of teachers and activists. Her father was a high school principal known for integrating the faculty at a time when such decisions were met with violence. Her mother, a Sunday school teacher and unpublished poet, filled their home with hymns, sonnets, and the fierce belief that words could both wound and heal. Eleanor's childhood was shaped by contradiction: the Sunday stillness of church, the fear of Jim Crow, the wonder of books. At age 11, she lost her older brother during the Little Rock school integration riots, a loss that shaped her voice, her fury, and her faith in storytelling as resistance. She attended Fisk University on a poetry scholarship and later transferred to Columbia University to study comparative literature. There, under the mentorship of novelist Carolyn Raines, Eleanor found her literary compass. Raines challenged her to abandon imitation and mine her own experiences, Southern pain, Black girlhood, and memory, for narrative power. "Your story," she would say, "is not yours to silence." In 1973, Eleanor published her debut novel The Weight of Silk, a generational saga chronicling the migration of a Black family from Mississippi to Chicago. It was hailed by The Atlantic as a novel of breathless beauty and bone-deep sorrow. The book won the National Book Critics Circle Award, and Eleanor became the youngest Black woman at that time to receive the honor. Throughout the 80s and 90s, she published 5 more novels and a celebrated collection of essays, Ink in My Blood. But Whitman never considered herself a celebrity. She often said, "I'm not a writer who performs. I'm a performer of silence. The page is my audience." She taught at Stanford University for over 30 years, developing what became known as the Whitman structure, a nonlinear narrative framework that encouraged writers to bend time, memory, and voice. It's now a staple in graduate writing programs across the country. More than 80 of her former students became published authors. 15 went on to win national or international literary awards. Many called her the mother of modern Black narrative. In 2004, she received the PN/Faulkner Lifetime Achievement Award for expanding the syntax of American identity. In 2010, the MacArthur Foundation recognized her with a Genius Grant for her contribution to narrative form and her unwavering commitment to mentoring emerging voices from marginalized backgrounds. But Eleanor's journey was not without trials. In 1981, she suffered a nervous breakdown after a failed marriage and the commercial failure of her second book. Critics called the novel too political, and publishers pulled it from shelves. Eleanor withdrew from the public for nearly 5 years, during which she taught creative writing in correctional facilities and wrote under a pseudonym for literary zines. "These years," she later said, "saved me because I stopped performing and started breathing again." In private life, Eleanor was unassuming, fond of chamomile tea, jigsaw puzzles, and late-night calls with her sister Miriam, a retired librarian. She never remarried, had no children, but often called her students "my life's wild garden." She donated nearly all her royalties to literacy programs in rural and inner-city communities. She walked daily along the bay, always carrying a leather-bound notebook, jotting down passing lines and overheard words. She was not a protester in the traditional sense, but her pen never ceased its march. During the Ferguson protests, she wrote a widely circulated open letter titled "This Too Is America," reminding readers that the country was not broken, only unfinished. "We must narrate what they deny," she wrote. Her final interview, conducted via voice recorder just weeks before her death, ended with the words, "I've written all I could. I hope it's enough. And if it isn't, write more." In her last days, Eleanor suffered from advanced pulmonary fibrosis, yet she continued writing letters to her students, dictating notes for future essays, and annotating poetry manuscripts. Her final act was leaving a sealed envelope labeled "For the Next Voice" atop her desk, its contents unread by the time of her passing. Eleanor Grace Whitman left behind not just memories, but an entire era embodied in her writings, ideas, and students. Bryan Lee Cranston. A Study in Shadows and Spotlight. Bryan Lee Cranston was born on March 7, 1956, in the gritty warmth of Canoga Park, a sun-drenched pocket of the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California. The town, though technically a neighborhood, had the mood of something in between, not quite city, not quite suburb, a place where the hum of backyard sprinklers mingled with the distant roar of freeways, and the golden smog-filtered light seemed to soften even the hardest edges. This was post-war California, hope blooming beside uncertainty, and it was here, amid stucco houses, palms rustling in lazy winds, and fading Hollywood dreams, that Bryan first opened his eyes. His father, Joseph Louis Cranston, was an actor and former amateur boxer, tall, handsome, ambitious, a man whose face could have sold cinema, yet whose dreams were perpetually one rung out of reach. Joseph walked through the house like a man rehearsing lines no one had asked him to read, his mood shifting like California weather. His mother, Audrey Peggy Selle, was a radio actress who later became a devoted homemaker, strong-willed and quietly resilient, a woman of deep wells who smiled more with her eyes than her mouth. Theirs was a household where ambition loomed larger than stability, and love sometimes took the form of absence. Bryan had an older brother, Kyle, and a younger sister, Amy. The three were bound by more than blood, by the invisible tension of growing up with a father who was always almost there, and a mother who grew tired of waiting for miracles. When Bryan was 11, Joseph walked out, not dramatically, but like a man who meant to come back but never really did. "We waited," Bryan would later say, "until waiting became a way of life." The family lost their home. For a time they lived with grandparents. There was food but not much joy. And in that quiet, emotional drought, Bryan learned the subtle art of watching. How people move when they think no one is looking, how pain can tuck itself into the smallest corners of a smile. He was not the loudest child, nor the most rebellious. Bryan was the observer, clever, dry, with a sharp wit that could slice or soothe. He loved comic books, westerns, and radio plays. He'd sit on the floor, legs crossed, absorbed in the cadence of a character's voice, mimicking them when no one was around. There was an order to performance, a way to rewrite reality by pretending, a comfort. At Canoga Park High School, Bryan was an average student, unremarkable to most. But inside him, seeds were stirring. He played baseball, delivered papers, washed dishes. His work ethic bloomed early, not out of discipline but out of necessity. There was a yearning for structure, and perhaps for an applause he didn't yet know he needed. One teacher, Mr. O'Brien, noticed something. He cast Bryan in a school play. "You disappear into the role," the teacher said. It was meant as praise, but for Bryan it felt like a revelation. Disappearing, after all, was something he had always done, only now it had a purpose. After high school, unsure of his path, Brian studied police science at Los Angeles Valley College, with thoughts of becoming a detective. The irony wasn't lost on him. A watcher training to watch more officially. But fate, or perhaps fate disguised as boredom, intervened. A drama class. An improv scene. A sudden fierce reawakening. Acting was not a profession, it was a calling. At 23, he hit the road on a motorcycle with his brother Kyle, riding up and down the Pacific coast, taking odd jobs: security guard, waiter, night watchman. Eventually, he circled back to Los Angeles, broke but burning with purpose. The early years were lean. He did commercials, chewing gum, cold medicine, anything that paid. He performed in soap operas, stage plays, and guest starred on television shows, often playing characters with names like Delivery Man or Guy in Line. But each line delivered, each audition endured, added layers to the craft. He was, in every sense, a working actor. Not chasing fame, but chasing truth in every role. It wasn't until the late 90s that the world began to truly notice. Malcolm in the Middle premiered in 2000, and Brian's portrayal of Hal, the loving, eccentric, half-unhinged father, became iconic. He brought slapstick pathos to the role, combining physical comedy with emotional depth. But even then, few foresaw what was coming. In 2008, a role arrived that would change not only his career, but the very landscape of television: Walter White in Breaking Bad. A chemistry teacher turned meth kingpin. A descent into darkness so profound, so precise, it became Shakespearean. Vince Gilligan, the show's creator, said, "I needed someone who could go from Mr. Chips to Scarface." Brian was that man. He didn't just play Walter. He became him, letting the character's rage, regret, and rotting pride seep into his bones. The performance was magnetic, terrifying, deeply human. Over 5 seasons, he won 4 Primetime Emmys. More importantly, he redefined what a television actor could be. But fame, as ever, was a double-edged crown. People stopped seeing Brian and started seeing Heisenberg. Fans whispered, "Say my name," in grocery stores. He smiled. He signed. But inside, he wrestled with the visibility, the expectations, the sudden weight of legacy. He escaped into the work. He wrote. He produced. He returned to the stage, starring as President Lyndon B. Johnson in All the Way, earning a Tony Award. He sought balance in motion. At home, Brian was quieter. He married actress Robin Dearden in 1989, a love story that began on the set of a television show. They had one daughter, Taylor. He cooked elaborate meals, read biographies, hiked alone at dawn. "I like silence," he once said. "It's the only place I hear myself think." He avoided scandals but not suffering. There were creative lulls, self-doubt, moments where the mask slipped. In interviews, he spoke of his father, the abandonment, the reconciliation years later, the final visit before Joseph died. "He taught me what not to be," Brian said, and somehow that was enough. In later years, he slowed his pace. He wrote a memoir, honest, unsparing. He mentored young actors, appeared in indie films, occasionally returned to Broadway. He rarely chased roles, they came to him. He built a life on his own terms, rich not with luxury but with meaning. A final performance, a one-man show based on the writings of Mark Twain, brought him full circle. "I am not afraid of the end," he told the audience one night, voice steady. "I've already lived more lives than I can count." When Bryan Cranston passed quietly in his sleep, the world sighed in loss, but also in gratitude. He had become more than an actor. He was a craftsman of emotion, a steward of complexity. He gave voice to the misunderstood, form to the fractured, and dignity to the broken. He showed us that greatness isn't about perfection. It's about truth, risk, and the refusal to settle. And now his voice, steady, haunting, kind, echoes in the canon of performance, in the classrooms where young actors study his scenes, in the living rooms where Walter White still knocks. In silence, we remember him, a man who disappeared again and again, only to reveal more than we ever expected.